Student teachers, welcome to a lesson about planning a content-based instruction listening lesson with Miss T N Vega. What are our lesson outcomes? First would be to determine how to write objectives for a listening lesson with CAPS content incorporated. Evaluate the relevance of a chosen text suitable to develop the listening skills in your lesson. Third would be to discuss how each pre, during, post listening activity is used within the text. And lastly, determine objectives of each activity in phase of the lesson. Now let's look at a possible question or what we might be required to do during our teaching experience or just as a teacher in general. Choose a text from any grade 5 subjects, CAPS aligned. You are required to use the text to design a lesson that will develop your learners' listening skills as well as understanding the content in the text. The CAPS home language documents, page 55, 66, or 70 would be a useful resource. Your lesson would need to include, wait, before we get to that, the text that I chose is a grade 5 home language English, a Fable Story as a text, just to let you know. First thing they require us to do is to write objectives for the listening lesson that you selected, include CAPS page references, explain what your text is about, and which grade 5 subject did you take it from. Motivate why you chose this text is suitable to develop your learners' listening skills. Excuse me. You may attach a copy of this text. Described the pre, during, post activities, post listening activities that you have designed to help you assess if your objective have been met. And lastly, in form of a table, indicate which activities are assessed, which objective during which phase of lesson. Okay. This is just us getting by titles of our lesson planning, how to design a lesson. This is not that formal. This is without the lesson plan table, and this is us just designing a lesson, okay? And let's just read through the headings before we look at CAPS. First thing we look at in lesson planning would be CAPS specific focus, the lesson objectives, curriculum integration, lesson planning, which is the introduction phase, the teaching and learning phase, the closure phase, and the teaching strategies. Just to name a few, there are more, such as instruction. Well, according to CAPS, for grade 5, since we are doing, well, let's just look at the whole structure of how CAPS would just outline it for you. Grade 5, term 1, they would have listening and speaking, oral, reading and viewing, writing and presenting, and how to make your formative or summative assessments according to that particular topic given. Okay, so the skills required, if we are, keep in mind, we are doing listening, we are testing listening, we're making a listening skills assessment. So we are going to look at listening and speaking, not reading, because that needs pre-reading, and as you can see, they wrote it pre-reading, post-listening, during, how to do this. These are teaching guidelines of how to perform a listening assessment, a reading assessment, a writing assessment, and this would be a guideline of what you are expected by CAPS to test on your worksheets or your test according to the topic at hand. So for us, listening, we are going to look at this block, right? So it's going to say, let's read through it. Listens to and discusses on the information text, text from a textbook or introduction. First of all, since our text is a fable, there is a fable for another page too, in caps. But the first thing you are expected by CAPS to do is to have introductory activities to cause the child to predict what's going to happen. That's what we call pre-listening. And to take part in a discussion and explaining their own opinion, that's still also under pre-listening, and can also be during listening activities. Identify and explain causes and effects, social, moral, you get the whole point. And so much, if you want to assess them, you can even get them to talk about the text in an unprepared speech, and so on. You can read further. That's CAPS grade 5 term 1. Going back to the lesson design, CAPS focus. This is what I took from CAPS mostly. Train listening skill through literature reading to establish language pronunciation and expression within the learner. Written skills to demonstrate knowledge on pronunciation, parts of speech, types of sentences, vocabulary, expression of punctuation, and while reading, and so forth. As you can see, this is just a brief overview of what you hope to achieve in CAPS. And what I just read, it basically tells you during and post. As you know, in post there's going to be a lot of writing, so the kids are going to identify the sentences within the story. They're going to take extract out particular vocabulary, such as find a similar word to this within the story. That's vocabulary, type of sentences, parts of speech. You'll see within the post listening, it really does achieve this lesson objective. Let's carry on. The learner taught literature from an educator by reading, meaning that I, as an educator, have to read to the kids so that the kids can hear how to pronounce particular words. During the pronunciation, it's always recommended for you to say out a difficult word that you think they might see as difficult. Say it out, and then and say to the kids, repeat after me that same word. That is also teaching them pronunciation. Show linguistic expression. Listening skills assess in language structure and principles. So that's during reading for the kids, the story. Lesson objective is to demonstrate clear knowledge on the language structure and principles. That's from CAPS. And demonstrates comprehension of the literature. So that can be tested from post-listening of the story. Post-listening activity. Okay. Curriculum integration would be the moral of the story teaches good interpersonal skills are not invaluable are not evaluated people by their weaknesses, meaning that do not evaluate people by their weaknesses, but pay equal opportunity to work together. That is taught in grade 5 life skills, personal and social well-being subjects. As you can see right there. Let's get to the lesson planning. For introduction phase, in this lesson, you'll be practicing listening and writing exercising in comprehension of Fable Story called Tortoise Story. At the beginning of the lesson, an educator will test prior knowledge by performing pre-listening activities to activate the learner's schemata. That is taken from your prescribed textbook, Wilson's, and aimed, well, not your prescribed, but any educator really. Wilson's are a good textbook, a practical guide in facilitating languages. Please do check it out. And aim to understand spoken or written texts they hear or read they may be unfamiliar with. Yeah, that's just self-explanatory. These activities develop the learner's prediction skills when they skim through literature or hear the title of a story or see pictures of the literature, according to Wilson's. Just to go back, learner's prediction. We all know that when we looked at CAPS, you always have to start with an activity that helps the child to predict what's going to happen. So for a fable story, it's always recommended to tell them the title of the story, show them a picture of the literature, any picture within the scenes, or better yet, the cover page. The pre-listening will perform prior knowledge by showing the learner the cover page of the Tortoise song and asking them how many for Tortoise song I'll be asking how many animals do you see in the picture, state the animals you see in the picture, and so forth. For teaching and learning, at this point of the lesson as an educator, you read out the fable story to the learners. This gives a chance to the learner to hear pronunciation and speech expressions to avoid learners from guessing how to pronounce. My while listening activity is to read the story with sounds and expressions of the characters and be in background sounds for the learners to stimulate the learner's imagination. This stimulation of imagination, it keeps the child interested in, it maintains attention basically. If you make sounds and if there's like shh, or when you say the tree branches falling bang on the ground, put some life in the story. This allows assimilation by building new schemata from existing schemata through accommodation. This results quality learning as great stimulation through learners' prior knowledge and interest is maintains the learner's attention, as I said before. So my while listening activity tests the learner's listening skills as it questions the story sound. It questions the story's sound effects made by the educator while reading and key events among the characters. So that's a good way to produce a while listening activity. Now, a technique to perform is shadowing on learners, where an educator asks the learner to repeat key sounds as I said before. This really helps during reading so that the child would first of all, you're keeping the attention in check. Second of all, you are teaching them new vocabulary and how to pronounce that vocabulary. This requires good intensive listening skills. So now this is a way that you are training, you are developing your learners listening skills. Keep in mind, in the question it said let them know how this text helps you in developing listening skills. This is an answer, one of them, in many that I've just given. In closure, now you're going to use your post listening activity. It gives the learner a chance to demonstrate knowledge of the content. Okay, so my post listening activity required the learners to write and answer a classroom exercise. This exercise goes along with CAPS as it tests a story structure, plot theme, background setting, and knowledge about the story characters. The post listening activity is, well, I'll show you in the next few. Writing exercises is based on the listening task, as CAPS require learners to be tested or taught language structure and principles. So it does go along with CAPS, which is parts of speech, types of sentences, vocabulary, pronunciation, and punctuation. This is all tested in post listening, because in post listening it really asks the child if they would identify parts of speech in the text in the story, and they would identify types of sentences, vocabulary, let's say what's similar to this word that's present in a story. Pronunciation is what you did for them within the technique of shadowing and pronunciation. So we've sorted that. The resources is the produced activity worksheets, the pre, the while, the post listening activities serves as assessments to evaluate, to really test if we have done the CAPS specific focuses. And these informal assessments is created for listening. It gives the teacher an idea of how a learner understands their context. For teaching strategy as well, it's very crucial, extremely crucial to use, since you're reading to them, it's direct instruction, but at the same time, you are also using role play. Role play is when you are doing the sounds and, exhibiting out all the sounds. I will put right here the tag to role play teaching strategy. All right. On the last question, they said it. How did each task support or really have the objectives achieved with the pre, the list, the during, and the post listening. So let's look at pre-listening tasks. The lesson objective is to predicting the story, looking at the theme page, folk, and looking at the characters, setting, and testing their prior knowledge and giving them a chance to guess on the plot. Okay, to view all of this in action, I'll put a tag here of how I've done the lesson for grade 5. I'll put a tag of the lesson, and it's the lesson of this whole lesson plan we're doing. So yes, the pre-listening did achieve, because it helped you to predict. As a teacher, we've predicted how the the title and the characters is in the picture, that's pre-listening. So we've done the objectives according to CAPS, right? So for during, the lesson objective is to listen and understand the story for comprehension, to identify the central idea, the plot, the setting, the atmosphere, the background sounds. That's when role playing comes to the teaching strategy. Role play comes to 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 play, because now you're giving the child's imagination a setup. You're asking them, is that right, is that wrong, did this character do this, why was this bad? Okay, so it's really within that objective of comprehension, where you use shadowing for pronunciation and vocabulary, where you asked the characters actions if they were right or wrong in the kid's opinion. So now this is where CAPS say, can they distinguish between reality and non-realistic events, discussing their own options. Excuse me. Excuse me. So the objective there is achieved on the during listening task. It's very how can I say, a communicative approach is not abused but used, because now they are learning a language. Learners should be exposed to the target language, so that they'll get the opportunity to practice and produce their own communication within a social setup. So the language learning should carry over class, where literature skills and reading, viewing, and so on is practiced according to CAPS 2. So for post-listening, the lesson objective is assessed by the learner on language structure and just really identifying conservations conservations of the characters in the story. Now it's best that you use text-based approach for this type post listening, because it has a purpose of enabling the learner to be confident and competent and be critical readers and writers and viewers of the language within the text. So it really involves listening, viewing, reading, analyzing texts to understand how they produced the language and the effects of certain sentences within language structure. So this is a critical interaction for learners to develop the ability to evaluate text. And text-based approach also involves producing different kinds of text for the purpose of audiences, and this approach is informed by understanding how texts are constructed according to CAPS. So all of this, I will put a tag again for the grade 5 lesson in play. And in play, I mean, as the teacher does it, applying all the teaching strategies and really looking at the task. Okay, let's look at pre-listening task. You see, this is grade 5 term 3. We said we are looking at, this is another page in CAPS. We said we're looking at folk. This is a folk story. Our text is a folk story, basically. So according to CAPS, the way you should assess within listening and speaking folk is when you first, at introduction, since it's pre-listening, this is introduction, the learner should be able to predict. So you are practicing and developing prediction skills. So how the teacher did it to accommodate prediction skills, we took the cover page of the story, which is the Tortoise story, as the pre-listening task, and we asked questions. How many learners, how many animals do you see in the picture? So it does really no wrong answer. But since they're grade 5, they know how to count. They're gonna count. You're gonna count with the learner. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's when you that's how you interact with the kids during pre-listening. Now, learners, state the animals that you see in the picture. So this is when you are interacting with the learners, because they will all be excited, hands up, and ready to answer. Oh ma'am, I see a giraffe. Oh ma'am, I see a tortoise. Oh ma'am, I see a zebra. Oh ma'am, I see a lion. So this is where you keep the kids in discussion. Okay, now they're expressing their own opinion, as it should be done in listening task, especially pre-listening. So now the next question would be, what are these animals doing? If digging, what are they digging for? Before you say if digging, you need to give the child a chance to answer. Let them guess. Let them guess. They'll probably look around. They'll be like, oh ma'am, I see soil, and the monkey is carrying soil. They probably, even if it's wrong, they probably planting. See, now this is where you stimulate the child's imagination. You are keeping them interested in the story, that what is possibly happening in the story. And okay, you're gonna acknowledge their answer and be like, okay, I hear you. Anyone who wants to express their opinion? And the next one will be like, ma'am, I see it's very dry. Maybe they are digging for treasure, because they're kids. They're so used to, folk stories. They'll think of the first thing, something close to what they know as digging for treasure. That's mostly like Peter Pan and whatnot, or treasure hunts, And some of them would say planting, because they see their own grandmothers do it in their backyard, or parents, or whatever. So the child, this is where you're digging for prior knowledge, because the child is telling you their own opinion and what possibly is happening. Okay, so carrying on, you're gonna say, okay, I acknowledge all of your answers. Do you think maybe they are digging? If so, if you think they're digging, while this is how you're talking to your learners. If you think they're digging, what are they digging for? Okay, that's when you give them a chance. What could they be possibly digging for? Okay, every learner has different answers. Now, this is how you interest the child. You draw attention, or that's what's gonna happen at the end. Is the first is let's say the name of the student, Zebo. Is Zebo right? Is Aisha wrong? Is Wade's opinion more better? Who has the right answer? So the kids are now excited. Who has the right answer about the story, as much as they predicted? Okay. And now just the last question, just to really amp up the curiosity. Why is the rabbit laughing? So that's the pre-listening. You are helping learners to predict what's going to happen, and have a discussion in class on what's going to possibly happen in the story. The story itself, I am not going to read through it. I'm going to put a tag right there for grade 5. grade 5, how grade 5 is the reading of the story, how we go about. So as you can see, the story has pictures. So while listening task, the while listening task says, while you're listening to the story, read out with the teacher what's going on, the main events. Here are the kids' options. Yes, they are very long, but they're actually in sync with what the teacher is reading. Okay, it's in sync. So please don't scramble up. Already they're trying to listen to the teacher, and it's always recommended. Tell the child, keep your finger along with what the teacher is reading, so that they will be um in the flow of reading what's going on. Okay, point out the words. Tell the kids that, point out while I'm reading. Okay, that's the second time when you read the story. The first one, they should just listen. Second time, which is the next day, they are required to point out. Okay, all right. While listening, so now you're gonna give them this page. In this page, they are, while listening, you're gonna go back and forth with his story. Okay, you're gonna be like, okay, what happened in this picture? This is you while listening, reading, right? You're showing them the book. What's happening in this part of the story? That's what you're asking in class, and they are gonna answer, and they are going to write down what sounds did the teacher make, basically. Okay. Post listening, that's at the end of the story. The questions that really re-evaluates according to CAPS, the questions are supposed to be testing if the child understands the theme of the story, the central plots, the characters, the background, what's going on. Is it fiction? Is it reality, realistic or unrealistic? So the good questions for post listening would be, first one would be, where were the animals living at? So now you're pointing out the background of the story. In this case, it was a safari. They can say safari, sub-Sahari, kind of answers. No answers, no answers is directly right, but they have to be on point. Okay, not too on point. Okay, why would the animals were so happy at the end? This is testing if they were actually listening. The end story, okay? Did they actually achieve what the objective of the lesson, which is comprehension? Did you listen thoroughly to know the answer? Okay, why were they sad in the first place? Which animal found the water whale, and did the animals think that this animal would find it, and why not? Okay, what lesson the did you learn from the story? Okay, this is important, because CAPS tells us the story has to have a moral story behind it. It has to teach some sort of value to the child. Okay. Okay, let's look at the classroom worksheet that I was talking about earlier. Um, we did mention that it had to have language structures, identify adjective in the story, form a sentence with it. This is actually both teaching parts of speech and how to form a structure. Even examples, that is very well recommended, especially working with intermediates. It's recommended to have examples. And to identify an adverb in the story, form a sentence, the same thing as one. As you can see, it's a lot of parts of speech that was present in the story. And okay, wait, fill in a suitable preposition in the sentence. This is the sentence. And now you give the child a definition of what is a preposition. And a preposition is a word that shows relationship between a noun or a pronoun. Okay. The lion chased the rabbit. Something's supposed to be in between. You get the point. Monkey laughed at the tortoise. What's supposed to be there? It's in the story. The monkey laughed at the tortoise as it digs slowly. Okay, so stuff like that. Identify the pronoun, conjunction, and preposition in the sentence. Okay, you got this. Like, what's into, what is into, what is day, what is day for, what is into, identify those. Identify, yeah, in the story, words that are used to show sounds like you know that's and yeah, so you can tweak. There's two more in the story. So vocabulary, this goes along with what we were trying to achieve in the first place. This is a classwork worksheets after post listening activity. Very handy and helpful, so consider this. As I mentioned before, let's check once again. Yes, pre-listening we did predict. Yes, while listening we did actually more like while listening and post, because we had to mostly post. We had to identify the settings, the characteristics of the fiction story, to identify what's realistic and what's unrealistic. We did do a lot of discussions in pre-listening. Remember, when they are expressing out their opinions and letting them justify their own opinion. Remember, pre-listening, and respond sensitively to their ideas and suggestions. This was well done in post and pre-listening, because now their ideas and suggestions. Remember the last question of post listening, it asked, what did you learn from the story? So that's a child's personal opinion and them justifying why they would say or state their opinion. Just to recap, we have determined how to write objectives for listening. Listen with caps, concepts incorporated by, we did. Evaluated the relevance of the chosen text as suitable to develop listening skills. We have discussed how each pre, during, and post listening activity were used along with the text, which is the story, and we have determined the objectives of each activity in the lesson. So feel free. Thank you first for watching, and feel free to subscribe, comment, and like to Miss Team Vega. You will see the story right here, and you will see the teaching strategy for this type of lesson right at the bottom. Please do subscribe to see more relative to what you would like to know. Please comment at the bottom, and like this channel. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time, student teachers. Bye.